And delivery of innovative new cloud services to enterprises and consumers requires the implementation of distributed cloud to edge computing architectures that across mobile and fixed access, and closer to the end user to deliver these new services with ultra-low latency, reliability, and scale. This distributed approach also brings with several challenges that service providers are beginning to address. Here to discuss these challenges are Peter Jarich. He's head of GSMA Intelligence. Next to him is Greg Collins. He's founder and principal analyst at Exact Ventures. And next to him is Sanjay Bhatia of Ribbon, vice president in strategy and solutions marketing at Ribbon Communications. And gentlemen, welcome.
Good to be here.
All right.
Thank you.
Good to have all of you. Of course, there's a much larger event just not far down the road from here. We're all here in Barcelona attending that event, so we appreciate your time and being with us and talking about, and Peter, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
Please.
Rolling out 5G and IoT deployments and services. How are mobile operators addressing not only the opportunities, but the challenges there?
Yeah, so I'll start with the challenges. Obviously, to roll out the services and the infrastructure to do that is not a small task, right? So I think from the challenges side of things, we've seen really a lot of them looking to extend what they've done with LTE, with 4G, to build those networks so that they can roll out 5G on top of that. Same thing with IoT, right? You see things like LTE-M, you see things like NB-IoT that could leverage sort of what they've been doing and maybe moving towards new cloud-based architectures to support that, right? From the opportunity side of things, though, I think what I'm excited about is what we're beginning to see this year at Mobile World Congress is that actually getting some of these services and networks rolled out so we can see what to do with them, right? There's a ton of folks that we've heard all about their launches, right? Whether it's Vodafone talking about how they're extending what they're doing, or you see, let's say, for example, what they've done already in Italy with IoT use cases, testing that out with 5G, all the different partnership programs out of those operators in Asia, or AT&T with the innovation program, right? It's testing this stuff so we can actually find out what consumers want, whether that's the enterprise or the actual consumer. So I think it's pretty exciting times.
Greg, mobile operators, challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, it's like Peter said, a great challenge, but also a great opportunity. And one of the great things about 5G is them being able to open up to these ultra low latencies and having the innovative types of services like drone management and AR and VR and that type of thing. And that really requires a new core network. And one of the things we cover at Exact Ventures is core networking and how that's transitioning from sort of the traditional bare metal type of products to the cloud. And it's really this transition to the cloud that's going to enable a lot of the operators to do things like network slicing, to provide a lot of these new services. Sort of in the short term, though, once an operator can really redo their core network or to modernize it, it enables a new cost structure, which is really important for 5G services. So, it'll be interesting to see what Rakuten can do in Japan with this new network and whether they can be disruptive like Reliance has been in India with the new network.
Same
really,
CTO.
Same CTO.
Go figure.
Yeah, and T-Mobile in the USA, spent a lot of time modernizing their core network to more of a cloud type of infrastructure. So that's really important.
Opportunities, challenges.
Yeah, it's great. I totally agree with my colleagues here, right? It's a lot of opportunity, but a lot of challenges to go with it, right? In terms of, how do you deploy these services with security? Security is utmost importance. How do you do this with reliability? How do you do it at scale? Similar to how the public cloud players are doing things in terms of consumer services. How do you address the enterprise edge? With that infrastructure, typically mobile operators have been very consumer-centric. How do you get into the enterprise side of things? How do you enable these devices? So lots of opportunities, but lots of challenges as well.
So Sanjay, your service provider customers, as far as cloud to edge services for enterprises and service providers, what kind of feedback are you getting right now?
Yeah,
and how has that changed, by the way?
Yeah. So we're lucky enough that we have started some of these deployments, but more on the voice services side, right? And so in terms of things that we have been doing in introducing edge-based services with virtual software approaches, right, from the cloud. is we've got some great, at the end of the day, it's all about how you helping from a business perspective, how you helping the enterprises in terms of customer experience management, how are you, assuring services, how are you helping the service providers actually monetize some of these things, right? So it's the business outcomes. So those are the angles that, the experiences we're gaining from some of the early deployments.
From an analyst perspective, and for both of you, any insights into mobile operators' feedback as far as these rollouts go?
Yeah, I think voice is a great first step in providing enterprise type of applications, mobile type of applications. More from the mobile operator directly to the enterprise. Like I mentioned, network slicing will enable more of an intimate relationship between the mobile operator and the enterprise, and providing these IoT type of applications that require, again, the higher degrees of latency, the higher performance, and having a more distributed core, which is part of the 5G standard, is again really important to that. And that's kind of we're at the leading edge of that, and we're starting to see operators deploy more edge cores and far edge cores, and that's just starting, and that will help enable a lot of these highly sensitive applications to perform well.
Yeah, I think the edge side, it's a really good question, particularly around the edge, because as I look at my customers who are a lot of mobile operators, right? My customers from a GSMA intelligence side of things, 500-600 operators out there, and they're really interested in what's going on in the core, I think, or in the edge rather, in part because I think it is a chance for them to maybe get back into the cloud business that they've kind of lost, right? They saw that cloud business go to some of the web scale and the public cloud guys, and a lot of them have gotten out of it, but here's a new chance to maybe get into that. And so I think it's an interesting, a lot of them you see doing some cool stuff. Well, let's start with our own applications, and then we'll move towards hosting third-party stuff. Are you seeing AT&T with making some noise there? You saw Telefonica just here at the show. What worries me a little bit though is how they see their relationship to the public cloud guys. We did a survey of operators and vendors. How are you thinking about edge? And the difference between how vendors and operators see it, particularly around the role of web scale players, right? Of who will be deploying workloads, who will generate value. The vendors, I think, have this really good view that, yes, it will be a bit of operators, but the public cloud and the web scale guys. The operators, I don't think they fully understand the role of the public cloud guys, right? And they're going to have to live in a world with them, and you can't just ignore them. So I think there's still some work to be done there of just helping the operators understand you have to work with these guys, if only because those are the folks that know how to expose applications. And edge is about more than just real estate, right? It's about real estate and application exposure, and I think the carrier still has some learnings to do there.
Yeah, I think you're right, and they're probably smart to be circumspect about how they deal with these companies, because the web scale players are fast growing. They can be maybe predatory in certain markets.
Let's partner today. Right. I'll take your business tomorrow.
Right. But I think you're right. There's going to have to be some sort of mix, some sort of hybrid cloud between what's in the enterprise, what's in the public cloud, what's in a private cloud. And maybe the enterprise is really where all of this sort of confluence is going to happen.
Yeah, you have great points, right? So we are seeing some early movement towards using the public cloud from a service provider angle too, right? In terms of, so we announced Comms Choice in Australia, New Zealand, right? The ANZAC environment. So they're deploying some cloud security services using AWS, for instance, right? So there, you have some early takers where the service providers are now beginning to see value in using the public cloud, for instance, for extending their geographic reach and being able to do web scale type of things.
And those examples are going to be key for them to figure this stuff out, because even the basic definition of what edge is, I think differs. Is it in the enterprise? Is that virtual CPE an edge node, or is that just CPE, or is it an IoT gateway, or where does this live? And I think we won't really have a good answer for that until we see learnings of like what Ribbon's doing with their customers and other vendors doing to go, okay, here's how this could work out together.
So, and Greg, I'll direct this question to you. You think that the penetration of cloud services deployment in the market today is at a pace that it should be, that's appropriate?
Well, I think it's going, and I think that 5G and the 5G standards are really helping to energize it. I think we've heard a lot about virtualization and cloud native, and you've seen some sort of leading edge companies deploy that with some success, and I mentioned them before, and that's really helped their cost structure and enabled them to be disruptive. I think with 5G it kind of legitimizes it for the masses, and to know that they have a roadmap, a standardized roadmap out there that their core networks are going to have to change pretty drastically, kind of can energize the market and is energizing the market on the core side, and we're starting to see that now. And I think that'll continue, as 5G goes from non-standalone to standalone. Mm-hmm. But I think it'll take time, and like Sanjay and Peter were mentioning, it's a big change. One of the big new things about a 5G core is that there's a new sort of a services-based architecture, a web-scale architecture, where there's not necessarily sort of a point-to-point relationship between network functions anymore. It's sort of a client-server, more of a client-server relationship, and to manage nodes in that kind of environment is very new to operators. So I think it's going to take time. That's one of the factors where it'll take time to get their learning curve up.
Sanjay, from a vendor perspective, and as far as service provider offerings, where do you think they need to maybe place more emphasis on and be more mindful of?
Well, I think really at the end of the day, it's about how you're creating positive business outcomes for the service providers, right? And when you start looking at that, so the enabling technologies and the architectures, making it distributed, providing low latency, I think those requirements are pretty well understood now by the industry. So the question then becomes, what are some of the innovations that you're going to actually use and create some positive business outcomes and allow the service providers to compete at web scale, right? And so that's where kind of Ribbon is participating in offering some new innovation in terms of new services and gathering intelligence from the network to be able to help the service providers implement some of this monetization.
Greg, of course, everyone's talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, of course 5G, IoT. Is the network ready for all this?
Gradually. I think the network produces a lot of data, and I think vendors and operators are getting better at consolidating the data pools, the data lakes, into a more cohesive, coherent database, if you will, and then applying more machine learning to solve business problems. Like security issues are a big one where I think machine learning or artificial intelligence can really help. And then being proactive about finding where network faults might occur. And then, of course, mining the customer information for opportunities as well is something that I think mobile operators can learn from the web scale folks as well, and maybe adapt some of their business models to account for more of that information as well, because that's really powerful.
Peter, before we almost wrap, I want to get to your thoughts on the cloudification of LTE services and sort of where we are on that spectrum right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. On the LTE front, I'll say that when LTE was first coming around, right, 10 years ago, I guess, I remember people asking me about, well, what is LTE, and is it just a new tech, just faster? And I was on a panel and someone said, well, it's just the next faster technology. And I said, no, it's an opportunity to renovate networks, to think differently. It's IP based, and clearly that was 10 years ago, and I was much more naive. Fewer gray hairs, more naive, because we didn't really see a huge renovation, at least when those first networks, rolled out, because you didn't have to, right? I think the interesting thing, as Greg was pointing out, is right. 5G, it's not sort of a should I do this? It's a I have to do this, right? The nice thing then is though, we're not just waking up to this, right? It's not like the Irish border problem with Brexit where we just figured that out, oh wow, there's another country there. No, we've known about this for a few years, and so operators started prepping for this with their LTE networks, right? So they started moving over their core networks, started looking at how do they move to prepare for 5G. So I think it's a good benefit for LTE, but it also brings up a really good point. In the whole discussion of 5G, and the one thing I worry about the discussion of 5G is it overlooks the fact that if you look at my forecasts out to 2025, most mobile broadband is still on LTE, right? You know, GSMA intelligence number shows 15% of connections 2025 will be 5G. The majority will be LTE, right? So I think it's a great question because we need to think about how we continue to evolve those LTE networks and LTE services because they're going to be around for a long time supporting a lot of people. And as much as 5G is important, LTE is going to be around for a while, so we can't just ignore, you know, the evolution of those services and networks.
You know, pertaining to the rollout of 5G, IoT, and the services that are sort of tangential to those technologies, typically I'll ask a futurist question about what we would be talking about next year, but I just feel like when's the inflection point where conversations really do evolve as far as 5G and IoT? It couldn't be next year, right? We have to give it a couple of years. Sanjay, I'll start with you.
Well, I think all good things take time in telecom, unfortunately, right? But I think the pace, you know, in this new agile world, right? I think there's urgency in terms of the pace of change, and we're seeing that on the cloud front, right? There's a lot of virtualization, like Greg was talking about. There's applications now being deployed quite a bit, right? So things are moving to the cloud, and so all of these are kind of all the building blocks that are needed for 5G and IoT, and I think things are getting in place for that momentum to pick up, but it's going to take some time, obviously.
Yeah, I agree. I think like next year we'll hear a lot more about 5G. I think that's obviously not going away, but I think the way the conversations will change is that there'll be more operational issues people will talk about. There'll be more ecosystem issues people will talk about. Maybe more, you know, just the practical life of trying to get these networks up and running. People be more cognizant of what needs to happen. Maybe there are more spectrum issues that need to come to the forefront, and people talk about that. So I think it's just coming up the curve and being more mature, and people really talking more about business and operational issues.
Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think, let's break those into two, right? On the IoT front, I don't think there's going to be an inflection point. I think on IoT, it's going to creep up on us, and one day we're just going to realize IoT doesn't make sense as a term, it's just how we do business, right? You know, I've heard people talk about, oh, the train will be connected to tell us about, no, trains should be connected, that should be the way things work. I mean, our research shows enterprises over 20 employees, 60% are using IoT in some form, right? And so, as a scale, no, but it's gonna creep up on us. 5G, I think next year we will be talking a lot more about it. I mean, you look at what we're seeing, right? You're seeing the services launch more than services, right? You see people like Sprint saying, hey, I'm gonna have a service and launch cloud gaming along with it, right? So we're gonna have phones this year, we're gonna have people testing out use cases. You know, I think next year we really will be talking about, it won't necessarily be at scale, but we'll definitely have a lot more to talk about.
It's good to have a high-level conversation about driving cloud to edge services. Sanjay, you're a big part of bringing that content to the forefront here and allowing all this to be possible. So we appreciate the effort and the time as well. And Greg, it was good to meet you.
Same here, thank you.
We'll do this again sometime soon, I'm sure. Probably this time next year. And Peter, as always, we've done this so many times, I think, that I understand your flow. So it's good to sit next to me.
For good or bad?
Well, the cameras are on for good. But it's good to see you all, and we'll see each other again soon. And for all of our viewers out there, for this executive panel on demand, you can go to thenetworkmediagroup.com. So long.